Hello there. Today I'm gonna record a deep dive into the config system that we're using inside GDK, inside the GitLab development kit. So let me browse my tree here and let me show you what we're at. So we are at lib and we have GDK, where we have basically the main class of all things is the ConfigSettings class. So this is the class that defines a DSL to create a config file like the one we have in GDK. So as you can see, so we create a config which derives from the config settings class on the left, and we specify a large number of settings here. And these settings are nestable attributes inside the class, and we can we can specify them as we go and have different types of them, but we'll dive deeper into that as we proceed. So the config file, as you can see, it specifies the type, the name of the attribute, and a default value. You can make the config settings, you can make each setting to use like code, Ruby code, to derive from other variables, or to run, like here it's it's locating checkmate from the dev. So you have here config dev is over here, then _bins, that's the go pod, that's the bin. So it finds it in the go pod where checkmate is. That's where the binary is. I suggest we first start with like a generic string type, for example. So we have let me find a really easy value that we can use. Okay, I don't know by heart, but anyhow, so we have different types here. We have bools, we have integers, we have arrays, we have strings and stuff like that. And basically we these DSL methods are defined in this here. So they're just like syntactic sugar around how you can find different types of config types, so it's not really important here. But as you can see, there's like a config type class for each type of attribute we have. Then and that calls the dev attribute methods, which is doing a bunch of other stuff, but we'll dive deeper into this. So all these are, and that's the main takeaway you should have from this presentation. These methods are class methods, obviously. So they are created at when the class is loaded into the Ruby memory. So when Ruby loads this class, it evaluates these class methods to define the attributes and stuff like that. But that's obvious. But the block we're passing to those class methods are actually instance evaluated. And like for example, we have so for example, we have this settings. So we have like GDK settings, and nested in there are experimental settings, and one of those settings is quiet. So quiet evaluates to config GDK quiet, and yeah, we use a question mark to make it a predicate method, but that's not really important. So this method calls config GDK quiet, which is actually just this method and just returns true. So this is a way that we get rid of like or not really get rid. We keep supporting the experimental method quiet, but just depend on what the value is from the non-experimental quiet, basically. But in this block, config is an instance of this class, of like the whole class in this file. And we call GDK on that and we call quiet on that. So basically it's the same as if you would do GDK config get gdk.quiet. It's true. So we get exactly the same thing here. And you even could do gdk.experimental. Let me see if I spell it correctly. No, I'm not. Experimental. Oh. So this is like a YAML representation of this sub ConfigSettings class. So this is really convenient for debugging and stuff like that, because it yeah, you can see what's happening under the hood. Okay, I think this should work as well. Okay, this works as well. So when you define a Boolean attribute, we create the method for both, like the normal name and a name with a question mark appended to it. Just some syntactic sugar again. Like I mentioned, it's important to know that this block is evaluated at instance level, and this and the definition of the attribute is evaluated at class level. And this can be really annoying and confusing because yeah, there are different stages of the stuff happening. Now I'm wondering if I can easily demonstrate what this means, because well, maybe if I would config. So if I would say I think it's like anything, and that is an object dot new. Is this the way you can do it? So no. Yeah, it returns an object. But the funny thing about this, and now I have to do let me quickly load Ruby. Now I have to do, I think, IRB. Okay, this is the command. So this is load slip into the thing, into the include slip into the load path, and yeah, something like that, and requires GDK. That's the thing. So now I can say config is GDK config dot new. Right, and so now we have a config and we can call the same thing on this. So this is my object, it's created. But as you can see, every time I execute this function, this method, the address of the object returned is different. That's because at the moment this block is evaluated each time we need a value. So that's a little bit annoying, I would say, or at least for some people it would be annoying. But you could, and that's the funny thing about it, like if you would say is blah, I don't know, I'm not sure if this works. No, this does not work. I think if I new, so now if I do config tone again, then I get the value from the YAML. So the YAML is loaded when you create the object, when you create the config object, and now it just keeps reading the value from that YAML file. Maybe I'm skipping ahead a little bit of myself here, because like parsing the YAML is something we'll dig into a little bit later. But anyhow, so these are the helper methods that that define the DSL actually to yeah, to make it possible to create attributes, or to specify attributes for your config. And the magic starts over here with the def attribute method. So it shouldn't be called directly, it should be called by one of these helper methods, and it takes the key, which is like the key that you have in your DSL. So basically quiet would be the key for this one. And it takes a class. What's the type of that? That's specified, that's selected by the helper method around this thing, and then you pass on whatever the arguments are and what the block is. So that's important to remember. So now we pass on the block to that class method, and over here the block is just returned true basically. We don't use any keyword arguments, so let's ignore that for now. Then for this, on the class we specify the key in the attributes. We put in the key, and we put in a config type builder object. So we don't really create the method on, well, hold on a sec. We don't really evaluate the block at this point, as you've noticed in my demonstration a little bit back, but we assign an builder object to the attribute. And what it does mean under the hood is that we define a method for the key, but we use that builder object to build not really the block, basically. Like we build, I'm not sure how to call it, dev build. Let me see how. Yeah, so we get the attribute, for the key, and we build it with self as the parent, because we need, as I've demonstrated earlier, we need to make it possible to access the config from the methods, from the block in the builder basically. So we have a builder and we build it, and that builder returns, well, what does the builder actually return? That's a great question. Anyhow, so we can go to the config type and let's see what's in the builder. That will be important. So we return an instance of class, and that's the thing, right? We return a config type depending on what the what was selected from the DSL. So we built a builder, we assign a builder to an attribute in a map. Then when we call a method, we look up the builder, and that builder will create a config type of a correct type, and we can get the value from that. So that's basically what's happening in the builder. So it's holds on to all the information to access the attributes when we need them. So we know what the key is, we know what the class is, so that's the config type argument, the keyword arguments, and the block, basically the block that's passed on through over here. So the true, this block is kept in this builder. So that's kept at class level. So the class knows what the attributes are. So I think config does not have any attributes. Well, it might be that we delegate attributes to, we delegate attributes to the class. So what we basically do is GDK config would return the same thing, right? So now we have a class. So when the config file, so when this file is evaluated, we build the class. We build how the class, all the config is evaluated, but we basically don't do any. We don't create the object, the config object yet. So there's no singleton object of this config when we evaluate this class. It knows how to build a config object. It doesn't really build it. Is there anything else I need to tell about this builder? Yeah, okay, this is something else that we might look into later. Now, so we have a bunch of config types, and I think we should be looking at the base type first. So I think all of them derive from the base type, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe the settings doesn't, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And so as we've seen in the builder, when we build an object, we initialize a class. So we create an instance of the class. So that's basically what we're doing over here. We set who is the parent. That's the parent's config object, because we can nest configs in each other. More on that still later. And we say who is the builder. For the value, as I've briefly touched on, so we have a GDK.yaml. So you can specify a bunch of settings in this file. So if you want to use your own values, you should specify them in this YAML file. And I am pretty sure that this method fetches the user value from the parent YAML. So because again, attributes can be nested, you have to look for the value in the correct tree item, and you ask just your parent has a YAML, which I've also demonstrated like a little bit earlier when I saw that like there's a subset of the YAML. So we can get the user value from that, and we store it in our settings. So this is the value, and this is the yeah, this is our so that happens on initialization. So I'm not sure. I think if we would say config build, yeah, that's what I was afraid about. Send build. Does this work? Could not fetch attributes for tone. All right, so this is what build returns. So the builder, this object, and as you can see again, so this normal, I suppose this object ID will change, but this won't, the builder won't, because we store the builder object in the class, and the class won't change. So if I call this again, this address is different, but this one ain't. Now I lost my train of thought a little bit, but so that's what the builder returns a config type object, and generally the user doesn't use this config type object. It's only interested in its value, and that's what you get when you call the named method by the attribute name. You call value on the config type. So that's what's basically happening under the hood. But there's more. There's a lot more happening, because what is the value method actually doing? There are a few things to keep in mind, but let me check what's happening here. Okay, I wasn't sure about that, but it seems we should only be we only should be evaluating the value once. Okay, okay, that makes sense because I've demonstrated that the object we return. Okay, now I have to let me revert to my YAML again, and okay, I did this. New, then this. Yeah. So this returns not new object every time. That's not because we evaluated the block every time because we don't store it. That's because the builder creates a config type every time again. So if we would say this is config, hold on a sec, let me copy this because I'm too lazy. So now we store the config type, and if we say tone.value, we get an address, but we always get the same address. Yeah, that's because like when the object is initialized, we read the value and we store that value in an attribute, in like a basic Ruby attribute. It depends on if we have a YAML attribute defined or not. If we don't have a YAML attribute defined, then we use a default value. And a default value, and here's like one of the most tricky parts I think in this, or well, not the most tricky part, but one of the tricky parts here is like on the parent, which is a ConfigSettings object, we instance evaluate the block. And that's the important thing here, because it's instance evaluated. And that's what I've mentioned before as well, because we evaluated on the instance and not on the class. And then we call the block. In this case, it's just a simple true, so it doesn't do anything special, but it could be calling config on or other arbitrary Ruby code. What else do I need to tell about this? Like there's a validate in here. So there's a validate method. And yeah, in this case it returns true, but why? Ah, right. So this construct looks a little bit weird. Why aren't we doing this? And that's basically because we want to call this setter method and parse the value and parse under the hood. Where is it? Where's my parse? Where's my parse? Okay, parse should be implemented by the child classes. So if we say anything, parse just returns a value. But if we say string, then we say, okay, if it's nil, that's a nil value. Then it's a type error. But if it's not nil, then we run to S on it. So what this does is because so tone is my, so if I would say tone.value is 1, which is number, then tone.value is also a string. Oh, this ain't right. This is an anything of obviously. Okay, this is an anything thing. I was not using a string. Do I have a string at hand somewhere? String. Yeah, hostname. Okay, hostname. So config hostname. That's a string. I could say config send build. Where is it? Host name. Okay. Is that h dot builds. I don't. Builder value. All right. So age, I can say value is 1. But if I say value, it's converted to a string. So that's what the parsing does under the hood. It sanitizes your input basically to fit the type that you need. So that's that for string. Like that's pretty straightforward. For integer is basically the same, but it does the other way around. It checks if you can convert it to a number, and it checks if the value actually is the same as you wanted. So I guess config p is no, not that, port. So p dot value is that value, okay. But I could say p dot value is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then p dot value is also sanitized to a number. But if I would do it like this, like an extremely high number that we are not able to parse into an integer, now it says okay, it's signed, but did it work? It did work. Okay, maybe my number still needs to be higher. Interesting. I did not know that we could store such large numbers. But okay, well, why not to the easy example? Oh, is it 4.0? Okay, yeah, but that's because it's not an integer. Yeah, that's true. Like floats are obviously not integers. Okay, then this example does not match up. I'm surprised that Ruby does this. I did not know that. Anyhow, that's beyond this demonstration. So what else is happening here? Port. I'm not sure if port does anything else. Yeah. Okay, there are special things around port that are not relevant for this. Let me go back to my config settings because that's the base class. So we have these DSL methods, then we have like how it parses the things, and then we have a validate method, and it iterates to the whole tree of attributes to validate all values. So that when the user specifies a value in the YAML, it's actually a valid YAML, and the user is informed about errors as soon as we can. Dump is basically a method that's called when we also like do the GDK config get command. There's some stuff going on because like we don't, and that's one thing to keep in mind for config. You have these underscore methods. So basically you have this underscore platform, and these are like hidden methods, so they are not dumped. So I think cd level git GDK config get, and then I say platform. Well, I think this works. But wait, let me take another example. Like dev check make, dev check make. So we only see the version. These two attributes are not shown because they're basically hidden with the double underscore. And that is what this function does, this method does, and we see this ignore function we have seen in the, was it in the builder? Yeah, over here. So that's that. Command, yeah, this is, it allows you to run a command inside the block of a config setting. Same for read executable, same for a find executable, same for read. Then we have user defined, which calls on the base class, calls user defined. So it checks if the user did define a value in the YAML, and if not, then we just define like, okay, it's the default. Fetch is called under the hood to find an attribute and things like that. Dig is also is used by config settings. So if we do this, then it says dev, and it will dig into this pod basically inside the YAML. So these are like just convenience methods. Bury is like the opposite. You can actually bury values again in the config. So config.tone is this object, but I could say config.bury tone. Is it like this? Slug new value. Okay, so bury.tone high. Config.tone is high. So you bury the value, but it's not. It's only in memory. It's only pertained in probably in the build. No, not in. Yeah, probably in the builder or not. No, it's in the YAML. Obviously in the YAML. I don't think you can unbury a value. So if I say config.yaml, then you see this value is basically written here. That's bury, save. Yeah, it allows you to save the YAML. There's some stuff. Yeah, so slugs are basically these things that I've been naming like this. This is like a slug for one setting. It's basically the whole path that leads to the setting in the tree of settings. Inspect is just for convenience to say method missing. Method missing. I am surprised we still have it here. Provide a shorter form for config settings. Right. So if you have a predicate method, and that's the enabled method, then it calls that on that. So on over here you have config.nginx, for example. Can I say dump? Yeah. So it has a binary and it has an enabled attribute. So I could say config nginx.enabled ? But I could always also say this, and that's basically a synonym for that. Again, some syntactic sugar. Yeah, port manager. That's something we added quite recently. So GDK keeps a track of which ports are in use by all the services there. So I can say config.port manager . Wow, this ain't right. Huh, interesting. Probably because, yeah. But anyhow, I could say to the port manager, and I'm not sure if that's possible. Like if I say config dot nginx dot port, can I assign this? I'm not sure. 443. That would be really cool. Yeah, that won't work. I would need to bury nginx port like this. Huh. Why is there no engine export? Config. There's no engine export. Alright, it doesn't use... okay, this doesn't seem right. So if I would say bury workhorse configured port. Okay, this works perfectly. So you can assign the other different services to the same port. Cool. What else do we need to check out? Attributes, some enabled value load YAML. So that's the short gist of it. I hope this is clear. I don't know what else I should be explaining at this point. Well, let me know if you have more questions. Thanks.